children face in flood-prone zones, and how we collectively strengthen school and Anganwadis to be safer, more inclusive, and be prepared for emergency. As we aim to maintain the flow of sessions and ensure everyone has equal opportunity to speak, we kindly request you to adhere the time limit for a session. So during the session, it's for the participants that during the sessions, if anyone have any question, please feel free to write in the chat box. We will take them during the discussion. Moving forward, we shall now begin with our session one, which is on understanding India's vulnerability to floods, empirical insights and community perspectives on children's risk. For this session, we have with us Ms. Latika Patnaik, ma'am, Educational Specialist, UNICEF India. Ms. Latika Patnaik brings over 28 years of experience at UNICEF, currently leading education initiatives in Odisha. She has also worked across West Bengal and contributed to national and international policy development on child rights and education. Her academic background includes teaching at Mayo College and Nayagarh College. She is deeply committed to grassroots work and child protection. We welcome you. Over to you.
Thank you for the kind words and for and the august presence of experts from various fields and the practitioners who are part of this webinar to give me an opportunity to share my thoughts and my experiences on this climate resilient and as well as how do we prepare. Because children have rights, and right to education in the country is also from 2010 is endorsed, which also talks about that it is not a welfare activity, but the continuity of learning, irrespective of the situation, is right of every child, starting from primary to higher secondary stages. So that includes also as the school readiness. Um, is also part of the Anganwadi Center as part of the 6 services that the ICDS offers, which includes nutrition and then health services, and as well as the education in initiatives like health education and also the normal education like school readiness initiatives, referral services, and as well as also the distribution of many of these initiatives to make the children's life more holistic and facilitate the development. So in that context, with the national education policy coming in 2020, also reiterates the continuity of learning from the age 3 to age 18 and also the higher education in a seamless manner at any point of time. So with this, I think it becomes imperative for practitioners and all of us who are in the field of several developmental field to work collectively and plan out and support the system, strengthen and support the system to strengthen and as well as to deliver these services for the children. Because we know that the children are very, very silent receiver. They're still developing and human child is dependent on adults and others. So in any form of natural calamities, then it becomes the impact is silent and the impact also comes out at a later stage. So we believe that if the system is resilient and if the system is prepared, then the continuity of some kind of a learning activity is a normalcy for the child. While the parent is collecting some ration and collecting some things like tent and other things for the lost houses and other things, and the child getting engaged with some kind of activity is important and is critical for the developmental manner, and then it allows there would be some amount of impact, but this impact is minimized if the system is prepared. So my point is, I work for Odisha actually, and from super cyclone time I have been here in and out, And then with every year, Odisha facing one flood or the other. And every year in October, November, we hear that October 29th, you must be knowing that it is also treated as one of the observation day commemorating that what had happened and how do we strengthen the resilience of the system and how do we improve on the services so there are zero casualty and other things in terms of cyclone and flood. So these kinds of, and there are newer kinds of emergencies are also natural calamities are upcoming, which were not there when we were children. And so the preparedness has to be there and it has to be multi-pronged and it has to be multi-layered. Especially when we say, and then the South Asia and if you say India, like in Assam and Bihar and Chhattisgarh and several other states also we see a lot of floods, and which also sometimes we hear that there has been a flood in Rajasthan and then we say that how could it that happen, and that is those are also climate triggered. So it is not a question of which state we work for, but as India, as we are facing several rounds of these natural calamities and especially flood, cyclone, and which can be some amount of preparedness can make the life of these children and families better. So in that light, the first thing that I would like to, and then there is a core commitment for children. UNICEF has that CCC, and many of you must have been familiar with it. And there is also the INE standards, which talks about what could be the standards in terms of emergency. So in Odisha, we have several times we have followed and we have brought it to the notice of the government partners. And we have at least disseminated and we have made them aware and got their endorsement to say that how can we create a more resilient, safe environment for them. Many other state governments like Assam, Bihar, and others also you would find with their DMA, the disaster management authorities, and the education combination. They have also come up with SOPs and standard protocol for in terms of emergency. So that's probably the first line of thought to execute our ideas and to put our things together, starting from preparation to the phase when it happens and the response and the recovery phase. So here, coming to my experience and the literature that we have done actually in education and in ICDS is primarily there has been in collection of information and a joint review assessment before the any kind of on-site of this kind of emergency has been part of the institutional mechanism. So I would request that this should be done prior, because many times in the emergency situation or in the midst of emergency flood situation, we start collecting information. That becomes doubly stressful for the development partners and as well as for the families who are affected. So I think that would talk about, and in ICDS, in Anganwadi centers, it is not only education, it is also the health and nutrition is combined, and that's probably is the priority. So identifying the children who have more of the malnutrition or the nutrition deficit, and identifying those children and those families, and that will be more helpful. So in case of a flood situation, I think the response can be quicker by the service provider. Before that, I think it's a preparedness. I think in the education system, the education, right to education is also a progressive realization. It is not, it doesn't happen overnight, because the infrastructure is one of the important aspect of this child-friendly, resilient system. And in the infrastructure, I think after super cyclone, I would say with my own experience in Odisha, I think progressively the infrastructure has been resilient, and which talks about more primarily like how it can be a more disaster responsive. And because we know that in the flood situation, many times whether it is flood or cyclone, the schools are used for the relief and rehabilitation center. So in that case, even if we have also, in my own experience, we have asked the district collectors and others that how can we start the school again, but that has not been possible because the survival of the people is the first and foremost right. So that way, when the government is dependent on that, or providing that ensuring the survival right, so the education comes as the second. So here, in case of a flood or a cyclone, I think the preparedness in terms of also advocating before these occurrences, and to have a more systematic plan that how it can be progressively, how this infrastructure can be more flood and cyclone resilient structures wherever there is a new construction that is happening, and that construction should be flood and cyclone resilient. We have districts, and in India, we would find several districts. We get very, very low lying area, and that gets flooded more often, flash floods and other kinds of flood. And then, and then the water system becomes impacted with that. So here, I think the structure that has come up, there has been a lot of innovations in the meantime, how we can manage or mitigate that. And then it can be also the school building when it is being constructed. I think if it is ideal if it is double-storied. So there is little space for the storage of materials. What has been the challenge has been the storage of material. We know that there would be a school in a box, or there is a Anganwadi in a bag, or something would be required to continue the continuity of learning. But we do not have that. The money is there in the plan, but we do not have this material. So what happens is, then even if the lower portion is submerged or something, then the upper portion, if we can, with the community support or something, the children can come, and then there is an accessible pathway to the building. Then some amount of activity can take place in that building, or before the flood, because we know that these are the monsoon months, and then that happens usually that happens in this kinds of time. So that preparedness of identification of an alternative space is critical. So that alternative space should also have more composite, comprehensive support system. There should be a little bit of water facility nearby, which is pure. There should be also a little facility for the toilets and other, and there has to be some storing space. So alternative system or alternative place, safe space for children has to be prepared, or has to be located, and has to be arranged so that the continuity of learning can take place. So this is in addition to the infrastructure. There has to be also in this infrastructure, in my experiences in the state on these emergencies, I would say that having some equipments which can be useful at the village level for evacuation of people, and or for having cutting a tree, or having clearing the debris or something. So in this kind of a situation, some amount of those small equipments also at the school or the Anganwadi center, if it is a school complex which has got an Anganwadi center, I think that becomes more useful, so that immediately the action can happen with the school community or the Anganwadi community partnership, and then the local level, it can start. The other is whenever the infrastructure is safe, and then probably identifying people who could probably facilitate, because we know that the teachers and Anganwadi workers are over busy with distribution of relief and other things. So even before the preparedness, they have a lot of role to identification of these children and these families who are more vulnerable, because flood also the same flood affects differentially for different children and different families. And the gender becomes an important aspect. And in the gender also, there are one has to keep an eye on. It is not that it is all children, but it is disaggregated gender wise, social categories wise, so that this information would be useful to make a more protective environment for all children. Then comes that after these infrastructure and the database and other things, before the flood that is collected, and before the flood, this situation also, this availability of these equipments, availability of the materials, like as I mentioned, we have made a local kit, school in a bag, and Anganwadi in a box. So that is primarily aligned to the existing curriculum. And the curriculum, so this is a preschool kit which the government provides across the country. So in the preschool kit, we can, the same cost, and this is a kit which was prepared with a list of items. And then there is, and it also aligns to the content or the curriculum, so the children do not miss out. And there are also some of the experiences also have been to engage the parents for a little time. So what happens is the parents also have a recuperating activity. So in the midst of so much of other discomfort, I think working with children with small activities, that helps them to also recover wherever it is possible, and or other caregivers at family level to tell them some stories and tell them some action songs, or do some pasting and some activity at home, if that is possible with, and then that awareness among the families is critical. In addition to that, especially for flood, because the water gets water contamination is high. So the messages that we give as partners or groups who have been supporting across the country or across the states in terms of different families, I think the messages, comprehensiveness of the correctness of the message is extremely important to to keep it ready. One is a WhatsApp, and other that is very often is being used. But I would say some amount of this other medium of like what can you do when there is a flood, and then how do you disinfect your your well or the hand pump or something, and then that could be also useful, because these reminders actually puts practice into place. Otherwise, what happens, we all know, but at the same time, whenever the disaster happens or the flood happens, then we find there are a lot of diarrhea incidences increasing, and people not being able to get safe water, and then hand washing and other things becomes difficult. So these messages, this availability of these messages and clear-cut messages in simple languages, and in Odisha, India being very diverse in languages, I would say many states would be also having linguistic diversity, and Orissa definitely is one. So having this material in, or these messages in different language or mother tongue, could be a very innovative idea to create the child-friendly, resilient environment and sustainable environment. Because the fact is, these floods, some amount of these floods are also these are natural calamities, so it can be prevented, we can be better prepared. But I think we have to, and there are areas, because moving away the families from those areas have been also challenging for government and others. So I think at least also in the rehabilitation center, the relief centers, these materials, these messages should be reiterated. And always we know that reinforcement is learning. So in that respect, I think preparedness of these materials to support and create awareness should not happen at the, it should more happen before these kinds of onset. And it should happen in terms of interpersonal or one-to-one or in a small group in those relief centers, by community helpers and other coordinators and others, while they are in the center or something, because it becomes very difficult to reach out to people and to have their, and they are also psychologically impacted, because their major livelihood and the food is no unavailability or lesser, and then the comfort is at stake. So at that moment, registering on getting some messages sometimes are not impactful. So for child friendly this, so this create, and then because the adults and teachers and Anganwadi workers and all of us, the children are dependent on us. So this capacity building of the different functionaries and having the awareness on certain positive habit practices is critical to respond and to prepare, and as well as also respond during the flood situation. Then comes the, actually primarily we were supposed to discuss what we can do before, but it is a cycle. So I would say also after the flood, or what did we learn? How did we manage? Many times we see a lot of pictures which are not that positive, and we know that how impactful, because with so many years of this emergency response work in the country and in several other countries in the South Asia, we have a lot of those visuals which also moves us. So in this kind of a situation, actually, I would say that probably to have also more positive climate, children led or children supported or children resilient kind of a system examples or activities that disseminations and network like this can do, so that we have more of these models and we don't do actually so much of knee jerk response during that time, or a relief, or probably reaching out. So while those are exceptional, but at the same time, for bringing back to normalcy and also creating a continuity of learning experiences, volunteers, if it is possible, to create a batch of volunteers who can be, and learning activities are actually also psychosocially recuperating. So it doesn't require a lot of psychoanalysis for that, but to give them comfort, to help them or facilitate the children to do some activity or to do some coloring activity which can actually or write storytelling, or writing or reading a book or something with a, or a puppet or some other kind of skit which are bit earlier prepared, and to present to them, so that what happens is they actually move away from those emotional turmoil for the time being when these activities are happening, because the children are also very smart, and then they move, their span of attention is faster, and then they respond to these kinds of situation differently than adults. So I think utilizing that and bringing some kind of a positivity in terms of organizing this activity, and without and less with a lesser level of and then the possibility of having a larger network of professional who can support creating that, who can probably do this continuity of learning exercises, and prepare them before the flood situation, and after the aftermath of the flood. In the flood time, if there is alternative space and these materials are available, then organizing those in some clusters, and then after flood, probably for some time till the situation is completely back to completely normal and functional, I think do those camp activities and stimulating activities for children. So that could be the preparation, and that could be the, and that content, I would say, these are there are several examples in the country, including Orissa also has some content for 45 days, for 30 days, for 20 days, kind of different packages for different levels of children, and so which are easily transactable by volunteers. But preparation of these volunteers and availability of these volunteers also is critical at that particular time. But the best possible manner is also building the capacity of the service provider, because even if they're engaged some time temporarily with some activity of flood response and situational analysis and distribution of relief, but when they come back, they actually talk in terms of this with the empathy to the children, and which makes their life more easier and more helpful. So the as you must have seen that also the child-friendly spaces for children in emergency is designed and implemented in providing children safe spaces, and there has been n number of examples in the country, and which includes recreation, education, health, and psychosocial support. And the school safety program of UNICEF also talks about 3 pillars, which are also applicable for this flood situation. Which talks about the first one is safe learning facility, safe site selection, and the material which I have talked about. And whenever the construction is happening, I think The building codes are there. There is a inclusive education, school building designs, accessible school design. I think that also talks about the emergency and non-emergency situation and safety and security of all children, especially girls. And the disaster resilient designs also have come up with a recurrent this kind of onset of emergency situation. And then the other component is the pillar 2 is the disaster management, that in the flood time, how do we do it? And then the third, as we discussed, as I mentioned a little bit, that in terms of risk reduction and resilience education. In this, actually, the children also can participate, and the children can also, the older children, the younger, even the younger children in the Anganwadi center are capable of knowing what to do. Like washing the hand is a habit which is being formed. And so that to continue before and after is something which is critical, which can be reiterated before and during this time also, whenever they are in some group in organizing this activity. And provisioning of this school in a box or school in a bag, and having ready-made some kind of state-made or state aligned curriculum material would be useful. And then the teacher training on the continuity of learning is also is absolutely a right of every child. And the negotiation and discussion can happen with the education department to build that capacity and to put it in the plan of the Samagra Sikkha Abhijan. And the National School Safety Policy of 2016 has been also enforced by Honorable Supreme Court, as we all know, and which also contributes and gives a legal standard for creating this enabling environment for children, especially in the flood and any other natural calamity. But the flood is actually where there are, it's more multi-pronged, because there is also the water, because there is people get stuck in their own houses, and if the houses are water redundant, redundant, and then that becomes more scary. And then it also has affects like impacts in terms of the reptiles and other things of other kinds of impact because of this. So how people are also not only education, only continuity of learning, but it is also other kind of the damages that happens, and which can happen very, very impact the children very much. So that could be probably looked at. And
Thank you,
children
ma'am.
is, yes.
Yes, ma'am. We do,
Is the
like,
time
if
over?
you ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, way
Thank
past
you.
the
Thank
time.
you. So that's it. I think that that probably I would conclude it here. Thank you so much.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a powerful session and highlighting how the system needs to be strengthened for the continuity of services for the children that would like create a normalcy for the children, and also discussing about the community perspectives from Orissa, like your thoughtful discussion on Odisha's response and rehabilitation also was very enlightening. If anybody has any question, we shall take it forward in the open discussion session. Moving forward, the session 2, focusing on strengthening schools and Anganwadis, resilient infrastructure and operational readiness. We have with us Mr. Naveen Shukla, Manager, Program Implementation Unit, Bal Raksha Bharat. Mr. Naveen Shukla is a public health and DRR specialist with more than a decade of experience in emergency health services and education in emergencies. He is currently leads school safety and child health initiative at Bal Raksha Bharat. He has previously served at Smile Foundation, SEED, and GVK, EMRI, and certified by Harvard University. His experience lies in resilience building and community-led plan. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanchita and Sphere India, for providing us the platform to talk about the infrastructure resiliency more about. So please allow me to share my screen. So once my screen and PPT visible, please let me know.
It is not visible yet, sir.
Now is it visible?
Hmm, yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So first, I start with the building resiliency of schools and Anganwadi in a flood prone. So what does mean by resilient infrastructure? So largely, as we all know, that 60% of India's land is prone to the floods, and we have experience to seen a larger events like Northeast floods in 2018. We have seen Kerala floods. We have seen recent flood of Assam and Odisha, where we have seen multiple schools and Anganwadi centers are closed, as this is one of the major impact on continuity of the education. So how the resiliency, especially in the institution like Anganwadi and schools, can be built up, so that in case of any future disaster, the continuity of the education and service continuity of the Anganwadi will remain exist, and providing the critical services during any kind of the humanitarian or kind of the humanitarian situations. So my screen is visible.
So yes, it is visible.
My
You would
system
have
is hang
to,
out.
yes,
Now is it visible?
it is visible, sir.
Okay. So largely during these floods, how this has been impacted to the children. So as I mentioned, that 18,000 schools was damaged, destroyed in Northeast floods in 2017. One of the third students experienced in the bullying in the schools. One of the third girl and one of the fifth child faced the sexual violence in the schools. 2015 Chennai flood, the education disrupted and the children impacted. Largely, the 35 days the schools were are closed, and 1.8 million people, including a 50% of the children, itself affected by the floods. Kerala, we have seen 2018 and 2023, which was a major kind of the areas which has been impacted, and a lot of their schools have been closed. So I was a part of the Kerala flood response, where we are doing the flood response in Yalappi and Wayanad. So where we have seen the children condition, especially post disaster, post flood scenario. Many of the children, they didn't see such kind of floods in the first time. So that critical trauma itself is being imparted into the children life. So these are the kind of long lasting impact that has been happening on the children life, to see this kind of the flood situation. Largely from 2000 till now, almost 35 children worldwide was being died in the schools due to the disaster, with the flood events, and destroyed, and thousands of the schools on annual basis. So this is the larger impact on the floods on the children in India. How it is critically impacted on the children line. So it is directly physical impact. So destroyed of infrastructure like schools, a kind of the facilities, learning material, school equipment, that has been a physical impact that has been showing. So it is also leading to the discontinuity of the education, which has a larger impact on the children. So second is a physical impact. So there is a injuries, there is a deaths of the children and the students during any kind of such disaster, and that has been observed. Second is a psychosocial impact. As I mentioned, that a lot of the children are being seen the first time such kind of floods, such kind of the disaster scenario. So that trauma, stress, and long-lasting mental health has been affected of the children. So this is also one of the major leading cause. Educational disruptions. So continuity learning is one of the major factor. Increase the dropout rates, loss of the educational opportunities, So that is a leading a long-term impact of the children. So early child marriage, child labor, that could be a leading cause of the impacting of the education during any kind of the critical scenarios. How it is affected to the rights of the children, because children has a right to, how it is survival right is all one of the rights that the children is. So deaths and injury from the structure collapse, fires, floods destroyed the children of the most fundamental rights of life. Protection, violence, abuse, neglect, this kind of the during any disaster, if this situation is happening, that is a protection rights. So then development right, because education is also one of the major right in at a time of any disaster situation. If the education is interrupted, that is also a violation of the kind of rights of the children. So education disruption, uh, improper social emotional development, that is also one of the major impact area where the rights has been violated. Participation wise, so while construction, while designing, while developing any kind of the infrastructure, any kind of the curriculum, where the children participation and children voice can also be heard. So that is also one of the major cause, while having the impact on the children, especially the participation rate is also impacting during any kind of the humanitarian situations. I hope my screen is visible. My
It is
laptop is hanged.
it is
Just
visible, sir. Uh,
I'm resharing it again. Now is it visible?
yes, it is now visible, sir.
Okay, thank you for confirmation. So how the comprehensive school and Anganwadi safety framework look like? So there are three principles while developing any kind of the Anganwadis and a school system. So first pillar is focusing on the safe school and Anganwadi facilities, which includes a hazard resistance design, construction, retrofitting of existing structure, and non-structural measures. So that is focusing on the first pillar. Second, school and Anganwadi safety management. This is also one of the major thing that developing of the school preparedness and Anganwadi preparedness planning, training of the frontline workers, especially the schools, Anganwadis, and workers, helpers, as well as the first responders. Third is a response mechanism, and fourth is a continuity of the education. That is also played a very crucial role. Third pillar is focusing on the risk reduction and education for an Anganwadi. This is largely focused on the building knowledge, capacities, building awareness among the schools and community members on various hazards which is being associated with the floods. So these are the larger periods which need to be focusing while designing any kind of the structure or framework for a school and Anganwadi resiliency.
So just click on the slide, I guess.
Okay. So coming to the design standard. So first and foremost important part is a site selection. Largely the school construction or school, the place which has been given, it is a kind of the isolate place. And while designing any kind of the school infrastructure, it is important that the site selection played a very crucial role. So because largely it has been seen in the villages or in urban areas that the school is being given the least priority while identifying any kind of the land. So after land identification, there is also a sequencing of the kind of the test that has been required while performing, while constructing any kind of the building. So it requires load bearable capacity of the building. There is also a kind of the land assessment could be required. Third is a soil assessment required. So moisture content, how the construction and the resilience material can be utilized while designing any kind of the household building. So site selection plays a very crucial role. Then building design, it is how we are using the materials, water resistance materials, how the resilience construction, specifically focusing on the climate and flood related disaster. And third is also the how we are defining to the spaces where the designing is being appropriate. Fourth is also focusing on the material, the exportation transportation of the material, which is also one of the main factor while designing any kind of the building. Third is the child-friendly spaces, which is also one of the crucial building. While designing any building, that is equally important that this building should be a child-friendly building, especially in the urban and rural context. The building has been designed. It is not very much appropriate as per the child need and child requirement. So while designing any kind of the school building or developing any kind of the building, it is required. It could be a child-friendly, inclusive, especially for the disabled friendly also, if the children who are studying, especially or especially able children. So the gender inclusive as well as the disability inclusive design could also be required while designing of any building. And also a multi-hazard approach. So that is also one of the major factors. So designing is a multiple hazard, flood, earthquake, fire. Right now, heat wave is also one of the major concerns. So while designing and developing any kind of building, we need to keep in mind that the design is appropriate to mitigate the risk of the different hazards. Yes, so coming to the kind of the retrofitting of the building. So largely, if you can see the photograph of the few of the buildings which need a lot of them. So this has been a post-disaster scenarios where the buildings were damaged, or a kind of the construction, specifically in the rural and urban context, it has been not appropriate as per the flood prone areas. So the assessment, a technical assessment is required. So largely, while retrofitting any of the building, the mistakes or the kind of the things that we are not focusing on the assessment. So that the technical assessment is required while preparing any kind of the retrofitting work into the schools or Anganwadi buildings. Second is also major drawing. Mostly when we are retrofitting anything, specifically for the schools building and Anganwadi buildings, the major drawing is plays a very critical role to measure the areas, to measure the constructed areas. So at the school level, so if you see the first photograph of the major drawing has been given. So the major drawing has been play a very crucial role while retrofitting of any kind of the building. Third is a rapid visual survey, because rapid visual survey is focusing on the non-structure elements, because largely it is one of the also most destroyed kind of the things during any flood situation. Most of the non-structure element has been damaged or washed out during any kind of the flood. So while retrofitting the structure, it is also equally important to retrofit of the non-structural part also, so for which a rapid visual survey is played a very crucial role. And development of the evacuation plan. So based on major drawing, we are supposed to develop a kind of the evacuation plan within the school and nearby the school also. And a visual survey is focusing on the RVS, rapid visual survey, and non-structural assessment and mitigation. So this the entire mitigation framework could be developed based on these technical assessment, and basis of this the specifically school retrofitting will be done. So structurally, largely in while any post flood retrofitting, there are largely a sanitation infrastructure that need to be retrofitted, water restoration part that need to be retrofitted. Third is the classrooms that which are being low line areas or low areas, so that need to be also retrofitted while the retrofitting plan has been there. The most and important part of it, that how we channelize the drainage system. Largely, if you see in one of the photograph where there is a behind the school boundary, there is a big drainage is there, which is being converted into a dump yard by the society. So the drainage system channelization and cleanness is also played a crucial role, especially in the urban area. So before monsoon, it is required that how the drainage system of the schools need to be checked and properly cleaned, so that the water could be channelized and it could be not waterlogged some places. So that's how the non-structure element on retrofitting can be done at the school and Anganwadi level. Talking about the operational protocol and emergency preparedness, so it is starting with the assessments, risk assessment associated with the buildings, associated with the homes and as well as the schools. So it is a kind of the holistic approach which we are supposed to follow. It is the that from their home to school or home to Anganwadi and back to their home. So all the potential rich which can be harm to the children, which can harm to the school infrastructure, which can harm to the school facilities, also harm to the teachers and non-teaching staff. So all the potential risk need to be identified while designing any kind of the infrastructure, any kind of the preparedness mechanism. Second is the planning. Planning is also played a very crucial role. So post assessments, how we are planning to mitigate all those kind of the risks which has been identified. So we need to plan it out, that what are the risks that need to be mitigated in a short term, that need to be mitigated at the midterm, and what are the risks need to be mitigated at the long term. And also which all the department where the coordination, communication and the resources can be pooled in. So that is also a planning could be required, where the all department approach, all department coordination played a very crucial role while planning any kind of the resilience building or construction of any building. Resource allocation, yes. So it is not the only responsibility of the education department, or only the responsibility of the ICDS department. It is a collective responsibility of all section of the society, including the community members, including the children, including the departments which are associated with the designing and developing of the school and community infrastructure. So that's how the resource as well as the departmental integration, which has played a very crucial role. Fifth is the training. Training is important while safeguarding of the children and the institution, a kind of the institution and the resources from any kind of the flood affected areas. So the training, especially for the teachers, children, specifically first responder training, is also important, so that the children may aware about the in term of any kind of the flood-like situation, what they are supposed to do, what is their response, what is their mechanism that need to be that need to be inculcated during any kind of the humanitarian situation. So specifically, training and planning is played a very crucial role, and regular drills and review. So this is also played a very crucial role. So flood-related stimulation exercises and plans review. This need to be also a very critical role which need to be played. So pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, that plan need to be reviewed, so that in term of if any situation is like happening, so that the schools is ready to respond in the situation. So similarly, there are several SOPs which need to be prepared during any kind of the humanitarian responses. Safe building evacuation protocol and clear, robust assembly points. So the safe evacuation. So if in case of any sudden flooding, so how the entire building need to be evacuated, which are the safe places have been there, what is the family, what is the kind of the assembly point where the entire building peoples need to be evacuated and safeguard. Second is a family preparedness and family reunification planning. That is also while observing in a past kind of disaster, the family reunification planning was something that plays a very crucial role while integrating of the families and children to connecting to their parents. So this is also one of the prior SOP previous before the any situation, any emergency situation. This preparedness planning can also be strengthened. Third is the resource management system as emergency supplies. Yes, so resource management. So pre-disaster scenarios, all the resource management system could be allocated, so that the response and specifically the effect of the disaster can be mitigated or minimized. and the losses and damages can be reduced. So the resource allocation and emergency supplies need to be strengthened. Communication protocol between school authorities, communities. So communication, the early warning and communication plan need to be pre-prepared, so that in kind of the any disaster like scenarios, the schools and communities and authorities, they respond effectively and timely manners, and it will be also helping to reduce the impact of the disasters. Community preparedness is also played a very crucial role, because while developing any kind of plans or kind of any kind of the developing any kind of the disaster preparedness plan, the community is always a first responder. So how we will be engaged with the community member, especially in terms of schools, the PTA, the Parents Teacher Association, the especially the SMCs, which played a very crucial role while bridging the gap between the SMCs with also parents and the school. So they played a very crucial role to engage the communities, engage the parents, so that the school and community could be come together as well as prepare their preparedness planning. Second is also during any kind of the humanitarian situation, a school is transformed as a kind of shelter spaces. So this building need to be resilient, so that in any kind of the flood like situation, any kind of earthquake like situation, or any kind of the disaster situation, that the building remain existing and with the capacity to safeguard the people who are be residing into the school. So this is also important to involve and engage the community peoples and involve their participation. This is also one of the major factor, largely the child-friendly spaces. So child-friendly spaces is a one-stop kind of solution which plays a crucial role while surviving of the children, protection of the children, as well as the mental health, catering the mental health need of the children. So this is and fourth is also the continuity of the education. So in kind of any humanitarian crisis of the buildings, the school building is damaged. So how effectively, how early we can develop a kind of the alternate spaces for the children, so the continuity of the children can be ensured, including the continuity of the education. This is also a recreational place where the children feel safe, they feel protected, and also the continuity of the children can be ensured. So this is one of the kind of the primary interventions that Bal Raksha Bharat did in previous flood like situation. So the inclusive, the a kind of the what are the resilience school and Anganwadi is infrastructure. It focusing on the four major key pillars. One is the infrastructure focus. So infrastructure is been designing as well as the retrofitting of the school. So this need to be strengthened. This need to be designed in appropriate manner. So in any kind of the flood like situation, the building is remain exists. Second is also the building safety audit. So it is also important that every year the school safety or school building audit can be taking place, so that the appropriate mitigation measure can be taken. Third is a proper drainage system. It is also equally important that the school have proper drainage and drainage system, as well as the mechanism, so that infrastructure can be focused. Second is operational readiness. As we mentioned that the emergency protocol preparedness planning, that is a crucial and integrated part of developing any kind of the resilience infrastructure. So operational readiness, operational plan is being placed before any emergency like situation. Inclusive approach focusing on all the inclusion of the children, inclusion of the teacher, inclusion of the community members, inclusion of the service, inclusion of the systems, which also talk about the genders inclusion, which also talk about the inclusion of the especially ableds and young children with their special needs. So the inclusion plays a very crucial role. Fourth is also the community integration and community participation, because community is always a first responder. To engage a community, a broader community, is also one of the major factor while designing, while developing any kind of the resilience building. the overall aim or overall goal, so with resiliency, our goal, we are focusing that 0 deaths, 0 days losses in the education and protection of the education system or education investment, so that this could be a resilience infrastructure, resilience continuity at all places. Yes, so this is the resilience infrastructure and construction. Yes, thank you, and over to.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing sensitive insights on the impact of floods on children, backed by your experiences in Wayanad and Alapi. Your focus on how natural hazards and risks can exacerbate the vulnerabilities was very impactful. The framework you presented to how to make a safe, resilient, and inclusive school designs, including land identification, building standards, child assessment was very vital for us and provided a practical roadmap, and also how retrofitting is done. So overall, it was very insightful. So thank you. Thank you so much. Moving forward, session 3, focusing on inclusive disaster risk reduction, community-led strategies for children with disabilities. The speaker for this session is Ms. Radhika Malik Al-Ghazi, founder and managing trustee, Astha. Ms. Radhika Al-Ghazi has worked for over 30 years with children with disabilities in urban slums of Delhi through her organization Astha. She is a leading voice in disability rights, having authored key reports and advocated for inclusive policies. During COVID-19, she has played a pivotal role in documenting and inclusive humanitarian responses, focusing on disability and access. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much, India, for inviting me, and thank you for putting the spotlight on children with disabilities. I would like to start by just putting a little bit of context here. As you know, that in any disaster, often children with disabilities are probably the last to get out or to be reached. And also in any disaster, disasters also lead to a lot of disability. And therefore, it is very important that we are aware of this particular fact when we are planning our responses to any disaster. Children with disabilities in communities tend to be hidden at home. If you go to a community just now and ask, are there any children with disabilities, you are likely to hear that, no, there are no kids with disabilities here. At present, and for many years, they are likely to be hidden away. They are likely to be isolated in a community. During COVID, when COVID struck, we were all disability organizations got together. And one of the things that we asked ourselves was, beyond where we all work, how do we find the child and the person with disability? How does relief reach when we don't really know where all they really are? Of course, our Anganwadi workers know exactly where every child is in the community, and that's a huge resource. But not for schools also had lists of children with disabilities. But we also know that many, many children are outside schools and outside the early childhood systems. Families of children with disabilities are often also isolated in the community. There are many reasons for this. It could be prejudice, it could be discrimination, it could be that they are very busy in trying to address the rehabilitation of the child, running here and there, trying to get services. Sometimes there is a lot of caretaking that the mother or the family members have to do. So they become isolated very often from the rest of the community. They are not part of the interest groups in the community, and therefore may lose out on information and are not connected so much to the mainstream. And therefore, when we are planning for any kind of disaster risk reduction, we have to be aware that there are families who are not part of the mainstream, and specific effort has to be made to include them. There is a very clear link between, as you know, disability and poverty, and disability and malnourishment. Many children with disabilities will have medical requirements, will be more vulnerable to medical ailments, to diarrhea, to other things, specifically when we are talking of floods, to waterborne diseases, and therefore will require that kind of support. Children may have assistive devices that they use, and very often during a situation of disaster, the assistive device can get damaged or it can get lost. And that also is something that we need to be ready to address. There are children who are more vulnerable than others, who may have more support need than others. Not all children with disabilities are the same or have the same support needs. And therefore, it's important to know who is that child in our community who has more needs, or a family, for example. We also have a concept of high support need families in our organization. Sometimes when there is a single parent with a child with disabilities, sometimes when there are two or more children or people with disabilities in a family, these become high support need families for us. And they have to be specific looking and understanding about how to include these families and children in our disaster relief planning. Now, schools and Anganwadis are, of course, most important for all children, and all children spend the longest time away from home in these institutions. They are our sites for rescue and for refuge when during a crisis. And they are also our sites for knowledge giving. For example, we've spoken just now about what happens and drills, like if there are drills in a school about what to do when there is a particular, when there are floods, for example. We're talking about floods today. But despite law and despite very strong policy in education, children with disabilities are not always present in schools in our country. If you look at UDICE data, and I have been looking at it for many, many years, you find that children with disabilities, 1%, little more than 1%, are enrolled in school. And that does not mean that they are coming regularly to schools. Very often they are asked to come once, or when there's a special educator available. Very often children are told, that we cannot look after the child. So children with disabilities are, a lot of children are out of schools. And the same holds true for the Anganwadi system. The Anganwadi system historically actually has excluded children with disabilities. It is only more recently that we have policies and we have guidelines where inclusion is being thought about. There is a lot of training that is happening. It is going to take us many years when all our 14 lakh and more Anganwadi and our whole system becomes inclusive. In the interim, it is important that plans are made that when there is a disaster, as these are very important spheres of influence, the school and the Anganwadi, they do include the child with disabilities. In schools and in schools, we find that if you look at data, you will find that as children progress in classes, there is a steep fall in the enrollment of the child with disabilities. Girls with disabilities. For the longest time, you will find, if you look at data, that girls with disabilities are less able to come to school than boys with disabilities. There are many concerns that families have of safety, security, and accessibility. Accessibility is yet another very big concern that families have once children are in school. Of course, there is a policy, and in 2016, India got the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, which is a large omnibus act, the rights of all people with disabilities in our country. It has very strong sections for children, children's rights and women's rights go across this act. And if you look at chapter 3, it talks about inclusive education. For the first time in our country, even though we've had SSA and we've always talked of inclusive education, we do have a definition of inclusive education in our country, which is really a system of education, which includes children with disabilities as well as all other children. So we are really talking systems here, and we are really talking of the whole school. This law talks about many, many things. It talks about non-discrimination in enrollment, in admissions, trained staff and teachers. Where note, it's not just teachers, it's all the staff in the school, the helpers, the others, the administrative staff that need to be trained to include the child. It talks about the provision of reasonable accommodation, small changes that are important so that the child can participate in the classroom and in all school activities. It talks about building campuses and various facilities, making them accessible. So you will see it is not about, and also this law has strong sections on accessibilities. Schools are seen as essential services. Accessibility also has a much, much wider definition in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as in our own law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. It does not pertain only to the physical access. It talks about the physical environment, accessibility in transport. One of the biggest barriers that children with disabilities face in getting to schools and is just the lack of transportation, of accessible transportation, of having roads that are accessible and so that they are able to reach properly to school. Many, many children drop out because of the lack of this kind of accessibility. We are also talking here about the accessibility of information and communication technology. The earlier speakers have spoken about how communication is so important during any kind of disaster or before that. So having accessible communication, that is, ma'am earlier spoke about the so many different languages in our country. Well, let's add more complexity to it, because there are also so many different ways of communicating. Children may not communicate with just words. They may communicate with their eyes. Children may use sign language. They may need very, very simple communication or pictorial communication so that they know what is happening. So accessibility, for example, many deaf kids during the COVID-19 disaster, many children who were deaf just did not know what was happening. It took a long time for their families and others to explain to them what was happening, because there was no information that was really available, that was accessible for them to understand what to do and what exactly is happening. Accessibility also means, and this is in our law, it talks about facilities, all the facilities in schools and all the services. Services is another very, very important part. So when we do an access audit of a school and when we think about universal design, we don't only think of the physical access. We also need to think very carefully of participation access. Is the child able to go to the playground? Is she able to play there? Is she able to do the experiments in the school? All these things. Is she able to use all the services? Are all the services designed in a way that she can use and participate? So participation of the child with disabilities in schools and in Anganwadis, not just being there, becomes extremely important. Even physical accessibility. Today, we need to go beyond the ramp and the rail and accessible toilets. We do have many guidelines. And at present, I'm very happy to inform this audience that as a result of the PIL, The government of India and members of civil society are formulating detailed accessibility guidelines, which will be part of the rules of the RPWD Act, and which will help us in the future when we are talking about preparing and actually dealing with a disaster and children with disabilities. I would like to share a little bit now about some of the strategies that have been used by community-based organizations in our country for children and people with disabilities. So we often talk about building back better. But what we have tried to do as a result of the COVID-19 disaster, many of us thought it would be important that we documented some of these strategies that are already being used by organizations and, of course, also government in various places. And so it is not just after something happens, but before, in our preparation. And this is what earlier speakers have also spoken about, before the crisis comes. As you know, education, children's education does get interrupted. But for children with disabilities, education is part of the whole habilitation and the rehabilitation process for this child. It cannot be looked at in isolation. We cannot look at the Anganwadis or the schools in isolation. They are a continuum of what happens in the community, access to what kinds of services are available for this child for habilitation and rehabilitation. And all this gets interrupted when there is a disaster. In this situation, we are talking about floods. So, for example, a child who was on long-term medication, there is no more medication, or the child needs to eat a particular kind of food, so that food may not be available. Or if a child is having some kind of therapy that needs to be done, suddenly all these things are interrupted and they affect the education and access to education for the child. So some of these organizations, and these are organizations in the tribal areas of Odisha. There's an organization called Sadhana, Sanchar in West Bengal, 24 Paraganas, Astha in Delhi, Ishwar Sankalp that works with people with psychosocial disabilities on the streets of Kolkata. We documented some of the strategies that these organizations, Jan Swasthya Sahyog, which is in Chhattisgarh, Bilaspur district, working again in remote tribal areas with people who have long-term illnesses as well as people and children with disabilities. There were some strategies we found that were very important. We have documented the strategies that they used before and how they were useful during the COVID-19 disaster. I'll talk about some of these strategies now. The first is proactive outreach. When children and people are vulnerable and are hidden, we need to proactively reach out to them. They are not going to come to us. So reaching out proactively and building trust with the families. When there is a lot of exclusion, as there is with children with disabilities and their families, it takes time to build trust. That building of trust and proactive reaching out close to the home of the child that the organizations did was most useful during the COVID-19 disaster, because a base had already been built and the links had already been built with the children and with their families. Bringing services closer to the child. Another thing that these organizations, as you know, there services within the communities also need to be absolutely accessible. And sometimes families of children with disabilities have to travel long time and distances to access services. So bringing these services to the child and the family where they live are most important, so that they can finally also access education. These organizations have also, they have increased access to services and use by households of children with disabilities, so that they become more part of the mainstream, so that when there is a disaster, they know what to go, where they can get things that are required for them. Having first responders in the communities who are from the communities. So they may be health workers, they may be CBR, community-based rehabilitation workers, they may be mothers, they may be family members of children with disabilities. Having these first responders who are from the community, who know the context of the community, speak the same language, know the child and the family, has been extremely useful, because they are the people who actually know and provide information to the child and to the family. So knowledge to the family as to what has happened, of the condition of the child. As you know, rehabilitation is a process. It's not a one-time thing. It takes time for families, for children to understand and to accommodate. And having a first responder who knows what to do, and this is something I think is very important, because we do have many first responders in our communities, but they don't always know what to do with a child with disability. And therefore, that training becomes extremely important, and they could link with all the others who are there who do know what to do.
Ma'am,
Okay,
you
finishing.
can wrap up.
Facilitating knowledge. The other thing that these organizations have done is to build DPOs, mothers groups, disease-based groups. These groups are extremely important because they build a community for the child with disabilities and for the person with disabilities and the family. And during an emergency, they were the ones who were able to support schools, Anganwadis, and the child to include the child with disabilities. Equity is built into the services. And the last thing I'd really like to say here is that, you know, this our new education policy is talking about new units of governance. The school complex talks about the school complex, and the school complex is supposed to provide for children with disabilities. It's a whole group of schools that work together. The RTE had spoken about school management committees. Today we talk about school complex management committees. These are committees that are powerful committees in communities. They have a mandate for children with disabilities in the RTE Act, and they are the ones who build the plans, and they should be really leveraged when we are talking about inclusion of children with disabilities in disaster support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable insights on children with disabilities and their heightened vulnerability, especially during disasters. Your emphasis on need to identify those who require extra support and include them in planning is very crucial. We also appreciate your highlighting the challenges of isolation, the link with poverty, and the recent progress in including children with disabilities in Anganwadi system. And you mentioned about the RPWD Act and how it talks about accessibility. Thank you so much, ma'am. Your session was very insightful for us. Moving forward, the last session, the session 4, focusing on safeguarding childhood amidst disasters, research-driven strategies for resilient schools and Anganwadis. The speaker for this session is Dr. Balu I, consultant, CCDRR Center and IDM.
I think since we are running out of the time, thank you for your introduction. So let me move forward.
Yeah, okay.
And also, I think not necessary to share the PPT. I'll just quickly run through a few important points since we are running out of the time. So first, I would like to give the important statistics where we can understand the importance and the relevance of the uh, resilient schools and Anganwadi centers. See, India is the home for the world's largest number of school-aged children. Among the total population in our country, 13.6% of the children were Anganwadi going children, right? And similarly, 23% of the children were school going age. So almost one third of our country population is either being in the Anganwadi center or into the school. So if you see this data, it shows the how much importance. Almost one third of the population were being in the Anganwadi or in the school. And second, we are also having almost 1.3 million schools and 1.4 million Anganwadi centers in our country. If you compare with the number of global level, almost there are 13 countries which is having less than this Anganwadi center population. So our Anganwadi center numbers itself more than the 13 countries population. So these 1.3 million schools and 1.4 million Anganwadi centers were located in the high disaster prone or high risk zones. At least I have been to all the states, and in each state I might have visited a couple of schools and Anganwadi centers where I found majority of the schools and Anganwadi centers which I have visited were being in the risk zone, where it is either being in the river bend or tank bend or in the landslide area. So, and also from almost 8.6 million pregnant women and 8 million lactating mothers were also being outed, being benefited from these Anganwadi centers. So this all data shows that how much it is important to build the resilient school and the resilient Anganwadi centers. And similarly, 34% of the government schools are only having the resilient infrastructure as per 2021 data. And since we are facing the extreme weather events and which leads to the more frequent and intense floods, which also heighten the flood frequency and where it is leads to the risk of school infrastructures. So if you look at the reason for the floods into the school, as already Naveen also has discussed that the school location where the school or Anganwadi center is being located is in the risk-prone area. And the selection of site, almost all these Anganwadi centers and the schools were being constructed before the Disaster Management Act, where we were focusing only on the reconstruction and recovery. So before that, after that only we have started thinking about the preparedness. And the second, the designing of the Anganwadi centers or schools and the construction challenges where we are not making either earthquake proof or flood resistant buildings. And there is insufficient elevation in the schools and also the lack of flood protection system in the schools and Anganwadi centers. Last year, in the same time, in the August, there was a heavy flood in the Vijayawada city, where I've been to visited all the schools, where I found that most of the Anganwadi centers and the schools which is located in the Vijayawada have been damaged, and also the children where they kept their learning materials also has been lost. And another data which I would like to share here, especially in the due to flood, there's unscheduled school closure is one of the major issue, and which leads to the negative impact on the academic performance of the students, especially in the exams, they are getting the less marks. And another data shows that in the flood, induced school closures varied between 15 to 6 months. Because of the floods, especially in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, the schools were being closed from 15 days to 6 months. On average, if you see 3 months where the schools were being closed, especially in the high flood-prone districts. So 3 months if the schools were being closed, just think about the learning discontinuity of the school students, which makes a huge learning gap between the students. So many times the school infrastructure is being affected because of the floods, and which leads to the negative impact on the children's education. Uh, in 2022, here I would like to refer a case study from Assam. In 2022, there was two waves of flood in Assam, and there is such a district. Almost there are 164 schools in that particular district. And one day, early morning, when the principal wake up and went to the school, the Palliswar Higher Secondary School, which was heavily flooded and it was submerged into the water. And this school, almost 30 to 40 adjoining villages, the students were studying in this school. And here, their education was affected because of the flood. And the principal mentioned that the furnitures inside the classrooms were damaged and the roofs were leaking. almost all the computers have been not working. And these midday meal rice packs and the food materials also has been lost. So seeing the situation, and here the seeds organization and the government, as state government came together, and they have taken certain initiative for building the resilience of the school, and they spent huge money and they have reconstructed the buildings. So they have also organized drills for the school students with the support of NDRF and SDRF. And because of this initiative, the school children could able to learn about the do's and don'ts and appropriate behavior for the floods. And further, the Parents Teacher Association has taken a resolution to construct a multi-story building in the school. And since the school was also located in the low-lying area, so they have decided to raise the platform as well, right? So after this initiative, the school has come up with the two-story building where the children are able to safely move even at the time of flood. So this initiative shows that where the public-private partnership is essential for the building resilience in the school and Anganwadi centers, right? And apart from that, the capacity building of students is also essential. And the Parents Teacher Association was very actively involving in building the resilience of the school. So the community involvement is also very much essential for building the resilience in the schools. So coming to the Anganwadi, almost 40% of the Anganwadi center in the rural area has weak structure. As 2023, the research data of Save the Children has shows that. And almost 1.2 lakh Anganwadi centers were closed or temporarily damaged in 2022 after these floods in our country. And similarly, in 2022, after the Assam floods, the PDNA report says that 2,618 Anganwadi centers were being lost. So this shows that how these Anganwadi centers were vulnerable to the floods. Here, I would like to refer my own experience. Just I would like to take you all to the 35 years before, where I was sitting in Anganwadi center, and my Anganwadi center was located nearby a lake. And one of my friend, unfortunately, he fell into the lake. And fortunately, the villager has rescued and saved him. And the second incident I would like to remember here, there were 6 children inside the Anganwadi center, and all these 2 Anganwadi workers and the teacher, they went to their home. One of my friend, he has locked the door of Anganwadi center from outside. I don't know, I couldn't remember for what purpose, why he has done. After locking the door, he was running to his home. And inside there are 5 children, including me. We all were shouting, Amma, Amma, Amma. We all were shouting continuously for 15 minutes. Can you imagine? And we all were just 3 or 4 years, I remember still. And we were shouting. And the Anganwadi was located far away from the village. No one has, it was audible to no one. And after 10-15 minutes only, the Anganwadi worker came and he opened. So there was no any other exit. There was only one exit. Still, in our country, there are many Anganwadi centers which has only one exit. And the third incident, after 2-3 or 1 years, and flood came into our village, the Anganwadi center was also damaged. So here, 3 things which we need to understand: the selection of center, especially for the Anganwadi. It was in the nearby lake. Just there was a road, 5 to 8 feet distance between the Anganwadi center and the lake. This is one of the major risks. And the second, there was no any additional or emergency exit in the Anganwadi center. And the third, because it was located into the nearby the lake, and there was a flood and the building was damaged. So when we are designing such Anganwadi centers or schools, we need to keep remember all these issues. And Kerala government has come up with the Smart Anganwadi initiative, where it's very awesome. If you see, it's like a mind-blowing that Anganwadi centers with all smart features. But the major issue is that there is a 2-floor. The first floor was sleeping the children afternoon, and there is a staircase also, which is a safety issue. I think in my personal view, in the Anganwadi center, there is no need of first floor or the steps. And they also had a small swimming pool for playing the children, and without fencing. But it was a wonderful initiative by the government of Kerala. But these small issues needs to be rectified. Otherwise, it was a perfect one. So here I would like to give a few of the schemes for building resilient infrastructure in the school and Anganwadi. So as we all aware, the National School Safety Program, which focuses on the structural and non-structural issues where it is the key feature is that hazard safety audits and evacuation planning and capacity building of the students. And similarly, we have a Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan where now creating and rehabilitation of the school infrastructure, and we have a PM Sri school scheme, and every year few school has been selected and it is being implemented to develop the resilient school infrastructure, and Mission Saxon and Anganwadi Posan 2.0. This is also building the resilience of the Anganwadi infrastructures, and this MGNRAGA also having a provision for construction of Anganwadi centers where we can build the resilience, and the Kerala Smart Anganwadi schemes, and the Rajasthan government has come up with the ideal Anganwadi center with the support of CSR and the state support model, and the Maharashtra Nangar has also come up with the tribal early childhood upgrade initiatives where they can e-learning and nutrition micro enterprise training also being given to the children's, and the Nagpur Jilla Parishad also come up with the initiative of super Anganwadis where the good infrastructure has been built up. So these are certain issues which we can see and few government schemes we have discussed. Here I'd like to give a few important recommendations for ensuring the resilient and safe school and Anganwadi centers. As we discussed, 1.4 million Anganwadi centers, schools, and 1.3 million Anganwadi centers, where we need to make a geo-tagging of all the schools and Anganwadi centers, and we need to classify higher risk zone and low and medium risk. So we need to classify all those Anganwadi centers and also with the geo-tagging. Second one is that the engineers in India, they're having very good mind, but they do not have a safety perspective. They think about how to construct the building to ensure all the facilities, but they much do not have a safety perspective. So we need to organize a safety training program, especially for all the engineers in the government and the private. And 13% of the children are going to the Anganwadi center, and 23 is in the percentage in the schools. We have a school safety program, but there is no any safety program for the children who are in the Anganwadi center. So similarly, there should be an Anganwadi safety program for to ensure the safety of the Anganwadi children. And regular safety audits to be conducted in the school and Anganwadi centers. And there should be a state-wise budgetary provision for including safety measures in the existing structure. Now the government has come up with wherever they are constructing new building, it's all these safety measures are being included. But the old buildings and the existing buildings safety also to be ensured that. So for that, we need a separate budgetary provision. And also integrating the disaster preparedness module into the early childhood education, the school education. And we have a large number of CSR activities where the disaster funds to be allocated for child-centric infrastructure retrofitting. And last week, government of Kerala has come up with an initiative that they were asking the opinion of parents. Instead of going for a summer holiday, they are going for the monsoon flood holidays. So they were asking the opinion. Since the Kerala weather is good, in the summer, so they are suffering a lot during the monsoon floods. So they are in the opinion of making their vacation during the monsoon. So similarly, based on the weather, so each state or the district, they should go for the weather-based vacation for the schools, so that we can also ensure the children's safety. So with this few recommendation, let me stop here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for presenting such your research-based strategies and inspiring us to integrate child-centric approaches in DRR planning in all levels. You also mentioned about your experience in Anganwadi Center back in 35 years ago and about geotagging and how it is important to geotag the schools. You also mentioned about the structure of the Anganwadis and the Kerala's initiative on Smart Anganwadi. That was very insightful and very much thank you to you. Now, moving forward to open discussion, I would like to thank all our speakers for such a thought-provoking session. We now have few minutes for open discussion. I encourage the participants to post their question in the chat. I'll now invite the reflections from our panelists and take a few selected questions that have come up during the session. Looking at the chat box, I don't think we have come across with any question, but I would particularly have a question to all the panelists. What do you think? What is one of the most urgent and inclusive action that the stakeholders from government to grassroots can ensure that schools and Anganwadis are not just disaster resilient, but also safe, accessible, and supportive of all children, including those marginalized and vulnerable backgrounds. Starting with Latika ma'am.
Hi, Sanchita. Good to get another opportunity. I'm actually Lalita, but it's okay. I just wanted to mention that when you look at the vulnerability of children, I think there are many. And Radhika also has mentioned about the disability, and the word disability can also have several layers. So with that, I think, and when it is layered with gender, it is layered with poverty, it is layered with a tribal, inaccessible area. I think there is no like rocket science, or there is something bullet that can be given as a recommendation. But I think gathering more of these nuances, understanding these situations is important to have the patience and try out different strategy. And just having some intervention and showing that the results have been very, very nice, that may be useful for some organizations who have been supporting that. But for the rights of the children, it is critical that it has to be holistic and comprehensive. The children have right to survive, have to develop, have to participate and protect. And this is not very easy in normal circumstances as well. So when we talk about emergency, when everybody is vulnerable and when there is the comfort is not there, so I think that situation, it becomes more to stay calm. What people say, I think to practice it, one has to be very well prepared. Starting from the engagement of all stakeholders or a group of stakeholders, having the specialization on those different components, because some people can talk about the infrastructure and the accessible designs, how that can progressively happen. Some groups can talk about what happens inside these institutions and how to prepare the cadre of people who can manage and handle the children and from the child rights. And then also to look at this safety audit from time to time to ensure the safety and protection of children. Because there can be a school or an Anganwadi center which has a simple pond or a tree, and the pond has something happened and then a child fell. And now we also see that even disaster like flood water getting into, which were not coming to the limelight earlier, that the midday meal and then there is food poisoning and then there is a chain of actions. So there are a lot of those, but the digital technology is also useful. Collating the good practices, I would say, is the best to make it more scale rather than having in localized area. And we have India has a lot of those experiences matching to the vulnerability, and that would be and then those good practices should be collated. And an organization like you and can have, because you are organizing such successful, and I think collating those practices, that will be very useful. Like adding some days to the academic calendar fulfills the rights of every child for the continuity of learning. So if it is 220 days, you say that the school would have 227 days. And in case there is no emergency, no flood, no cyclone that year, then the school can have more holidays. But those are some ideas, and how children led could also be thought of. It shouldn't be only a service. So separately, we can, if there are some other opportunity, we can talk about it. But that was really wonderful to listen to people and to reflect and to respond more responsibly, to try out some new ideas. That was very, very useful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I don't think Naveen sir, is Naveen sir here? I don't think so. He's here. Moving forward, ma'am, Radhika ma'am, if you have something to say, ponder light on the question.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say that I think, in our planning, we have to be very local because there is such a diversity in this country. And as far as the rights of children are concerned, I think, what we need to do, the rights are the same, but the color of the rights is different. And therefore, if we have a more universal perspective and we look at, locally as well as globally in countrywide, where all children, and the ones who are vulnerable in that particular place, we are, how do we include all these children? We give it a more universal design, all stakeholders come together. There can be a great deal of learning. I have been part of many child rights, meetings and all, and I've learned that it's not enough to talk of one child. Of course, I talk of disability, but I'd like to talk about all children who are vulnerable, or all children and then children who are vulnerable. And that's how we should plan. Because even with disability, it goes across all vulnerabilities. There are girls, boys belonging to different faiths, different castes, different everything. Street children, others, trafficked children. I mean, India needs to look at all of it together. Thank you.
I absolutely agree, ma'am. And how we also see the children from the LGBTQ community and the transgender children. They often face very they are not accessible to any of the resources, and they are mostly neglected in the school and Anganwadi setups. So that is a very big issue we need to focus light on, along with all the vulnerable children. So moving forward, I guess we do have a shortage of time, so I would like to move forward with the vote of thanks. So on the behalf of Sphere India and Sphere India Academy, we extend our sincere gratitude to all of you joining today's webinar, which is very insightful. Your active participation and thoughtful engagement made this dialogue very deeply and very meaningful. As climate induced floods continue to disrupt children education, protection, and well being, your commitment to collaborative action and inclusive planning is more critical than ever. A heartfelt thanks to our speaker, Lalita ma'am, Naveen sir, Radhika ma'am, and Dr. Balu sir for their powerful insights and practical recommendation. From infrastructure design to community-based inclusion and policy innovation, your contribution have added immense value to our session. To all the participants, educators, child rights advocates, DRR professionals, government representatives, and community leaders, thank you for being a part of this very important conversation. Your presence reflects the growing collective to resolve and ensure that schools and Anganwadis are safe, inclusive, and resilient learning spaces for every child. We look forward for your continued engagement in upcoming sessions under Sphere India Academy as we continue to advance dialogue and action on disaster risk reduction, public health, and humanitarian preparedness. Please stay connected to our digital platforms and don't forget to share your feedback, which will help us to shape our session more meaningful and impactful ahead. Thanks you once again. Stay safe, stay committed, and stay resilient. Thank you.
Thank you.